We have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait to next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how do you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast.
Hello and welcome to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast, episode 176, presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. As you've noticed, Major Caldwell, Tara Roberts, they could not join us this week, so you're getting me riding solo. And this week, we are going to talk about the best landing spots for soon-to-be former Ravens quarterback Lamar Jackson, as well as some fantasy sleepers for your 2023 fantasy drafts. So right off the get-go, we've got to get into the news and notes. Lots happening this week, and we're going to start off with Michael Thomas, still not 100%, and water is still wet. Yes, Michael Thomas and not being healthy is like Crocs with socks. You know it's not right, and yet it feels so good. This feels normal when we're talking about fantasy. We haven't seen a healthy Michael Thomas in quite some time. Could this be a built-in excuse for Derek Carr early on already, not having a prominent weapon? We know Chris Olave, he's going to be doing his thing there. Alvin Kamara, we don't know what his situation is, especially the legalities are kind of going with that. But now not having Michael Thomas kind of puts the Saints at a little bit of a disadvantage compared to some of these other teams around the National Football League. That being said, that NFC South is a wide open division where the team with the best quarterback could end up winning it. Now, we've seen Carolina make some moves here in recent weeks. We know they've got the first overall pick here in the NFL draft, which could be CJ Stroud, could be Bryce Young, possibly even Anthony Richardson. Who knows where it's going to be, as long as it ain't that mayonnaise coffee drinking Will Levis. Let's be honest about that right now, which should be a huge red flag. And by the way, rumors around the league right now are he is failing these conversations, these meetings with these teams. It's almost like he kept a $100 bill that was in the back of the playbook. Now, another thing we need to talk about here as we move on. How about the whole quarterback situation there in San Francisco? We know that Brock Purdy is still recovering from that UCL type surgery there. We know he's not going to be ready anytime soon. So it looks like it's going to be Trey Lance versus Sam Darnold. Yes, that's basically where we've come down to Trey Lance. Is Trey Lance basically Zach Wilson? I mean, I don't want to say that. I don't want to put that voodoo on anybody, but the way San Francisco just can't evaluate quarterback talent. Let's call the ways. Maybe they got lucky in Brock Purdy being there. Then again, every other team in the National Football League must have been just as bad when we keep scouting because nobody took a shot on Brock Purdy. That's why he was basically Mr. Irrelevant. I mean, he was Mr. Irrelevant. Let's call it the way it is. But Trey Lance, the draft capital invested in Trey Lance just to see it going head-to-head with Sam Darnold. Now, Sam Darnold, hey, let's call it the way that is too, because he was a top selection of the New York Jets. So you got basically two high-end quarterback prospects battling out for quarterback one supremacy there in San Francisco, except neither one of them is the quarterback one. Now, I digress when it comes to that, but how about teams looking for quarterbacks like the New York Jets? They're still sitting there waiting on Aaron Rodgers. We still don't have any more information pertaining to Aaron Rodgers of where this deal is going to be. Robert Saleh basically said it's going to happen. It's just going to take some time. So we can still pencil Aaron Rodgers in as a New York Jet. But if I'm the New York Jets, I may make a play for Lamar Jackson while I'm waiting. I mean, this has taken way too long trying to find some compensation to get Aaron Rodgers. And now it's talking about that the Packers go, you know what? Keep your 13th overall pick. Maybe we don't need a first round to make this happen. Yeah, no doubt. No one wants to pay that for a quarterback at this age. So New York, they're standing firm on what they're willing to give as compensation. The Packers want a little bit more. Nothing's happening. Hey, Packers, if you drag your feet, I say the Jets, they get right in on the whole Lamar Jackson thing. We need to see some trades here leading up to the 2023 NFL draft. And a couple of the bigger names out there right now are Derrick Henry of the Tennessee Titans and DeAndre Hopkins of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, for me personally, Derrick Henry, where does he end up? I don't know where he's going. I mean, Miami could really use a running back. Raheem Mostert, Jeffrey Wilson, these guys really don't do it for me in that offense. I mean, I like how this offense is going with Tyreek Hill, with Jalen Waddle, even with Tua Tagovailoa under center. I like how this offense looks. They just need someone to run the ball. And that's where Derrick Henry could go in. And we know that Miami, they're not afraid of making splash plays. They went out there, they got Jalen Ramsey to go out there, to go opposite of Xavier Howard. So you know they're willing to make those moves. Now, another place I wouldn't mind seeing Derrick Henry is that Chicago Bears team, simply because they can basically rent Derrick Henry for a season or two because they have a lot of financial aid behind them. I mean, they've got the salary cap. If you don't get to take this money with you when it's all said and done, the salary cap changes from year to year. So why don't you spend when you can spend it? Because I guarantee you'll make that up in jersey sales, because Chicago Bears fans are going to love the way that Derrick Henry runs, especially in November, especially in December, when this Bears team could potentially be making a playoff push. As for Hopkins, his story is a little bit different because there's a lot of teams that could use a wide receiver, but is Hopkins truly a wide receiver one at this point of his career? I don't know if he is or not, but I'll tell you what, he's still pretty darn good too, which could be an excellent complement opposite of Stephon Diggs in Buffalo. Look, if you know what Stephon Diggs, and we've seen Gabriel Davis flash at times, but Gabriel Davis just ain't that dude. Let's call that the way it is as well. DeAndre Hopkins, he is going to absolutely show in, game out, no matter how it breaks down, because where Gabriel Davis failed in the past, DeAndre Hopkins is not. You can't double team Stephon Diggs when DeAndre Hopkins is on that other boundary. It's that simple. You can't do it. And then you throw Khalil Shakir there in the slot, and you've got yourself another very potent offense once again in Buffalo. Buffalo has invested in this defense time and time again, and they've got 0 Super Bowl appearances to show for it. Now is the time to go all in on this offense and see if we can simply outscore teams. Now, another move here that I like recently is whatever is old is new again in Seattle, as is the case for linebacker Bobby Wagner. Last March, he was released from the Seattle Seahawks before signing with the Los Angeles Rams. Apparently, the grass was not greener. The lights were not necessarily brighter in Hollywood than they were in Seattle. Seattle was the team that made a push for the playoffs, where the Rams ran into some injury issues, and then all of a sudden their depth came in because, hey, they were pretty top heavy. Now, Seattle, they've got a different situation going on there. This is a team that is on the cusp of competing. We've seen that, but they're going to need another solid season out of Geno Smith. The Seahawks are only going to go as far as Geno Smith can get this offense going. We know DK Metcalf. We know Tyler Lockett. Who knows? Maybe they go out there and make a big move here in the draft and grab one of those top 4 wide receivers in the first round. I'll believe that when I see it. But when you bring Bobby Wagner to come back in to kind of help out this linebacking core that's going to be missing Jordan Brooks, who's recovering from an ACL surgery that he had just in January, and they lost other players there like Cody Barton to the Washington Commanders. So they definitely need help in that middle, especially at linebacker. And finally, last but not least, because this is a pro Irv Smith Jr., I can't quit you. We're going to talk about Irv Smith Jr. a little bit later, but he just signed with the Cincinnati Bengals. If you're looking to get your career back on track, the Cincinnati Bengals, they're a team that can get you another contract. That's probably why Irv Smith signed a 1-year deal. This 1-year deal, hopefully for him, will lead into a 3-year deal down the road. That's basically a breakdown of the news and notes of the week that was, but we cannot talk about the week that was without talking about Lamar Jackson. It's really that simple when we break it all down here. Lamar Jackson was the biggest news around the National Football League, especially because his news broke as the owners' meetings were taking place down in Arizona. And basically, as Jim Harbaugh is sitting there answering questions, minding his own business, boom, Lamar Jackson, without an agent, playing his own man here, sends out a tweet saying, hey, I want out. Trade me. I wanted out back on March 2nd. We're now talking about March 26th. I am gone. There is no recovering. Kind of like Kobe. Remember Kobe Bryant basically did this with the Lakers years ago? They reconciled and won a couple more championships out of the deal. I don't see that being the case in Baltimore. For too long, the Ravens have taken for granted what Lamar Jackson is capable of doing. Is Lamar Jackson the perfect quarterback? No, he's not. We've seen his limitations appear from time in and time out. But the bottom line is he has improved each and every year. This is a bona fide Pro Bowler that could take your team to the Super Bowl if the right pieces are put in place. The problem is Baltimore has never put those pieces in place. He asked for some weapons. What do you give him? You give him an aging Deshaun Jackson. You give him Rashad Bateman. Well, you know what? Well, the jury's still out on Bateman, but you really haven't given him anything. And then when he makes his trade demands, which you already knew about, you reward him by going out there and signing Nelson Aguilar? No, that is not it. That is not how you keep a franchise quarterback happy. If you are serious about this man leading your franchise into the future, you have to give him weapons. Jalen Hurts, he got A.J. Brown. Josh Allen, he got himself Stephon Diggs. We've just seen Justin Fields and the Bears go out there and get DJ Moore. If you want your young quarterback to be successful, you have to give him the resources to do so. And the Baltimore Ravens have failed their fans, and they have failed Lamar Jackson in this aspect. So what are some teams that make sense for Lamar Jackson? We got to do what's best for Lamar and his family here, because there's some good landing spots for him that do not involve Baltimore. Starting off, where do I think he ends up? I think he ends up in the NFC North. I don't know if that's going to be Detroit. I don't know if that's going to be Minnesota. And you're like, hey, why would he go to Minnesota? They already have Kirk Cousins. If you're not looking for the best player available to lead your team, then you're not doing your job. And you better believe that the Minnesota Vikings are definitely looking at Lamar Jackson as a possible option instead of Kirk Cousins. They could flip Kirk Cousins back to Baltimore. They'd have a quarterback there. They need a bridge quarterback, whatever that situation is. So they could make that offer. It's going to cost them a little bit more than some of these other teams, because the Vikings, they don't have the same kind of draft capital as teams like the Detroit Lions, as the Seattle Seahawks, who both have 2 first-round picks in this year's draft. But the Minnesota Vikings are one of those teams that I think could make some noise because they know what they already have. They have Dalvin Cook if they choose to keep him. They got Alexander Mattison that they just re-signed via free agency. You've got Justin Jefferson. You've got TJ Hawkinson. So you've already got better weapons than he's ever had. Actually, every team I'm talking about has better weapons to throw to than what the Baltimore Ravens present to Jackson. The other team, like I said, is Detroit there. 2 first-round picks here in 2023. They have Jared Goff, who could be part of another blockbuster deal. Remember, he's what the Lions got in return when they traded Matthew Stafford away to the Los Angeles Rams. And the one thing that both these teams have in common, they're in the NFC. So chances are that Baltimore will not be competing with either one of these teams, which makes it enticing to them and it makes it enticing to both these teams. So whoever lands Lamar Jackson in that NFC North is going to be the favorite to win the division. It's really that simple. I don't know if the Vikings right now can repeat a double-digit win season. I really can't. They had a lot of close games last season. I just don't see them duplicating that. Meanwhile, the over-under for the Detroit Lions is 9.5. They had 9 wins last season. I think they can get 10 wins right now. And if they get Lamar Jackson, the way this rest of this NFC shaped out, especially at the quarterback position, this could put them right there with the Philadelphia Eagles as the odds-on favorite to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl. A dark horse team in all this. How about the Miami Dolphins? Because I love what the Miami Dolphins have done here. You've already got yourself half a track team right there in Tyreek Hill, in Jalen Waddle. These guys can flat out fly. You add the dimension of Lamar Jackson to that backfield. Not only can he make the throws that you're going to ask him to make to guys like Tyreek Hill, you see what Tua Tagovailoa is able to do. He doesn't need a big arm to make big plays for Tyreek Hill. Jalen Waddle, same thing. All you need to do is hit little bubble screens, little outs. These guys are gone. They can take in the distance. And this is going to be huge for Lamar Jackson because he doesn't necessarily have to think about running all the time when he can just dump the pass off and let his playmakers make plays. Funny how that works, right, Baltimore? Give the ball to your best players, save your quarterback from taking some unnecessary hits, and then you increase his longevity within the league, which means the Miami Dolphins will be willing to give him a bigger contract. But, hey, they got Tua Tagovailoa. Well, Tagovailoa's health is always going to be a concern when it comes to Miami Dolphins, and they have to think about what's next. Now, I don't think they're going to risk not signing Tua Tagovailoa to that 5th-year option because of that head injury and concussion history and all this other stuff, because we've seen what happens when you don't sign these quarterbacks and get them under contract going into that 5th year. If you don't pick up that 5th-year option, you're going to be paying a lot more down the road. Now, if Miami chooses that, hey, you know what? We're not quite there yet. Lamar Jackson's is the route we want to go. I love this move for the Miami Dolphins and for fantasy as well. Now, what is the best bit for fantasy? Who fits the bill for Lamar Jackson in fantasy? How about the Washington Commanders in free agency? They have already been making moves to this offensive line. They've improved this offensive line already, and they've got playmakers all over the place. In the backfield, you got Brian Robinson, who is going to be that guy in between the tackles to make plays happen. You got Antonio Gibson basically filling in that Jet McKinnon type role for Eric Bieniemy here in this Commanders backfield. So By the way, we're going to talk about Antonio Gibson a little bit later on the show as well. And then as a pass catchers are concerned, Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, these are all guys that can make plays with the ball. And by the way, this would be by far the best quarterback that Terry McLaurin has had since he's been in Washington. So if you're looking at a guy who's a fringe wide receiver 1, somewhere in that wide receiver 12 to 15 range like Terry McLaurin is, the addition of Lamar Jackson automatically brings him into top 12 conversation easily. And then Dotson, he's another guy who's ascending. He was one of the top rookies last season. And really, outside of Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, I don't think I would have taken any other rookie wide receiver over Jahan Dotson. And Curtis Samuel, we've seen him flash at times. And I think having a guy like Lamar Jackson who can be a threat to run the ball at any time is going to open things up underneath for a guy like Curtis Samuel on those jet sweeps, on that all kind of play action that gets him in moving, where teams have to try and account for Lamar Jackson, account for the running back, and account for Curtis Samuel. So this gives the Washington Commanders and Eric Bieniemy's offense a little bit more to think about for defensive coordinators. Where do I want him to see him go? Hey, I'm biased. I got no problem with this. Could you imagine Lamar Jackson in silver and black? Now, Jimmy Garoppolo was essentially in on a one-year deal, and like the Seattle Seahawks, with Geno Smith, Jimmy Garoppolo is basically expendable. I mean, you're really not committing much to him. With Geno Smith, he's already said that, hey, if you're going to bring a rookie quarterback in, I'm okay being that mentor. I think Smith would understand Jackson coming into the fold as well there in Seattle. And Jimmy Garoppolo, he knows this is a business. He's seen this play out time and time again. He basically had a job taken from him from San Francisco, from Trey Lance, and then went to Brock Purdy. And who knows, could be Sam Darnold this season. But as far as Lamar Jackson as a Raider, there's weapons in place for Lamar Jackson to be successful there as well. And the Raiders, they do have a top 7 pick in which they'd have to add to it, but there's still enough with that 7th overall selection that you could possibly move up to the 103 with the Arizona Cardinals and then get your quarterback there, more likely Anthony Richardson. And then finally, the craziest fit of all. What if the San Francisco 49ers say, you know what, Sam Darnold, he ain't it. Brock Purdy, it was fun while it lasted. Trey Lance, you know what? We may have made a mistake there. So I'll tell you what, Baltimore, we'll give you a first plus Trey Lance for Lamar Jackson. Now, I'm sure there'll be some other moving pieces involved, but the basics of this would be an early draft selection here and Trey Lance for Lamar Jackson. And could you, let's think about this. San Francisco with Lamar Jackson, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. Now, bring in Lamar Jackson and then trying to re-sign Brandon Ayuk next season may be difficult. But right off the get-go, as soon as Lamar Jackson steps into that room, we talk about there's not a whole lot of good quarterbacks in the NFC. You put Lamar Jackson in San Francisco, and all of a sudden, that is the team to beat. I'm sorry, Philadelphia. If the 49ers have a quarterback, especially one of Lamar Jackson's caliber, they automatically become the team to beat. It's that simple. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. Moving along here, because we're running out of time. We want to try and cram the show in as quickly as possible. And because I'm running solo here and my voice is already starting to get a little bit dry, we are going to talk about fantasy sleepers. We're going to give you some tight ends. We're going to give you some running backs, some wide receivers along the way. And first off, we know what the wasteland is at the tight end position last season. So we need to talk about what kind of tight ends are going to rise like the Phoenix, rise out of the ashes, and ascend to top 5 potential overall placement here. We've seen it every year, whether it's like Logan Thomas, the Dalton Schultz a couple seasons ago before he became prominent. There's always a tight end that nobody's quite expecting to do what they do. And here we are talking about them as a top 5 option in fantasy. This year, how about Chigakonko there? Austin Hooper, he's flew the coop from Tennessee to Las Vegas, leaving as Okonkwo as the main man there. And not that he wasn't already establishing himself as the main man in Tennessee, but with Hooper being there, he was always involved. Whether you wanted him to be involved or not, Hooper was getting a lot more looks than what he deserved there, especially with how much talent Okonkwo currently has. Like, look at him. Look at that, 2.61 yards per route run last season, which was the tops amongst the position. Yeah, that's right. Better than Travis Kelce, better than Mark Andrews, better than Kyle Pitts, better than any tight end out there. And then if you break that down even a little bit further, when you're looking at a Okonkwo versus man or base against zone, among all tight ends, he was a number 1 tight end in yards per route run against the zone coverage, and he was number 4 when it came to man coverage. So whether it's zone or whether it's man, you know he's getting the job done. Now, part of that is because teams are stacking the box against Derrick Henry, and that's still going to be the case here until Derrick Henry gets traded. We talk about the path to production. And right now in Tennessee, that path is wide open. It's basically Treylon Burks, Chigakonkwo, and Derrick Henry. That's it. That's all the offensive weapons that they've currently got there in Tennessee. Now, that could change too in the draft. They have a good draft selection coming up that could land them one of the top wide receivers, but that's not really something I think that Tennessee's looking at after spending that draft pick on Treylon Burks just a season ago. Need some more analytics to defend why Chigakonkwo is one of the best sleepers out there. How about over the last 5 seasons, there have only been 5 players that have finished with a higher than 0.35 EPA per target, along with a 7.9 yards after the catch per reception to go with 30 receptions. Those 5 players, George Kittle, another fellow tight end there, Jamar Chase, Deebo Samuel, and A.J. Brown, as well as Mr. Okonkwo. Yeah, that's pretty good conversations to have. And Tennessee, they haven't added nothing via free agency to even make you think that Okonkwo won't be getting more targets here in 2023. Now, we talked about one of those other tight ends at the beginning of the show that I really like, and that happens to be Mr. Irv Smith Jr. Now, I'm probably falling for this again, and fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me a third time, well, guess what? That's also on me as well. But listen, I think this is the year for Irv Smith. I really do. Now, I could be talking out of both ends right now, but if you look at what the Cincinnati Bengals have recently been able to do, this is going to happen for real. Hayden Hurst last season, 52 receptions, 414 yards, and a pair of scores playing in this offense. And I know we all want to believe that Irv Smith Jr. is a superior athlete to Hayden Hurst. We really do. I mean, I've been touting Irv Smith Jr. as a sleeper now for 3 years, a dynasty mustache. So I need this to happen more than I need water to drink and air to breathe. I need an Irv Smith resurrection here for fantasy amongst the tight end position. I can't even think of anything better than that taking place. So for me, Irv Smith Jr. is that guy. I think when you got Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, looking clean, by the way, in that number 5 jersey, that's going to take a lot of the attention away. And then you look at Irv Smith Jr. Yes, Kirk Cousins, he got the job done, but Joe Burrow is a much better passer of the ball than what Kirk Cousins was. I think we all can agree on that, mostly because we all hate on Kirk Cousins. By the way, he doesn't get nearly enough love as what he deserves. But Joe Burrow to Irv Smith sounds a lot better, feels a lot better than Kirk Cousins to Irv Smith Jr. So for me, those are the 2 tight ends that I think you're going to want to get on your rosters, especially Irv Smith. I think he's basically probably going undrafted in a lot of startups right now because no one really wants to touch him. So let's move along to the wide receiver position, and let's talk about another wide receiver here for the Houston Texans. We talk about that path to production. There's nothing there right now in Houston that's going to slow Nico Collins down. Yes, they signed Robert Woods. Yes, they signed Noah Brown. That's not going to get the job done. We don't even know what's happening with John Mechie yet. So until we know what's going on with John Mechie, I'm not going to worry about this. And yes, the Texans, they have 2 picks in the top 12. They could go quarterback there at pick number 2. And at pick number 12, it could be. Can you imagine C.J. Stroud dropping to number 2 and then going and filling it out with Jackson Smith and the Jigba there and giving Stroud another target? I mean, that would be fantastic. That would be like best case scenario for the Houston Texans. I don't know if that's going to happen, but it could. So I will kind of mention that in this show. But look, Brandon Cooks, he's gone. He's no longer Texan. He's a Dallas Cowboy. Robert Woods, he is a Texan. That is addition through subtraction for fantasy, right? We can all agree Brandon Cooks is a better wide receiver than Robert Woods. Therefore, that move is better for Nico Collins. Now, the biggest move I mentioned is going to be who is under center for the Texans next season, because it's not going to be Davis Mills. Davis Mills in that long neck, it was horrible for the Houston Texans and any wide receiver last season. Despite Nico Collins having to suffer through Davis Mills, and despite him only scoring twice last season on a per-game basis in half-point PPR, Nico Collins was still the wide receiver 52. Yeah, I know, that's nothing. That's way down there. That's barely even a flex option. But what I like to see, if you could tell me that he's seeing a target on 25% of the routes in which he runs, and that number is right up there with Devonta Smith of the Philadelphia Eagles, now that is something I can go, you know what? There's opportunity there. You're on the field. You're seeing targets. It's going to be there. With a young quarterback, Nico Collins is essentially the name brand out there for the Houston Texans, and a young quarterback is going to be targeting him. Yes, Dameon Pierce is there. Yes, Devin Singletary is there in the backfield. They're going to rely on the run game a little bit in Houston. Nico Collins is going to be that guy, especially down in the red zone. Amari Rodgers, he is not going to be an obstacle down in the red zone. Let's call it the way. You want a big wide receiver. Nico Collins, look at the highlights. Look at the film. He can make those tough catches when given the opportunity to do so. So that's why Nico Collins is another one of those sleepers you have to get. Speaking of wide receivers, let's give you a rookie wide receiver in Quentin Johnson. Every year, a rookie steps up that we discard. And right now in that draft process, there's two wide receivers right now that we're kind of forgetting about that are very high up on a lot of it. Last season, it was Chris Olave. He dropped down. We kind of knocked him down a peg or two throughout the process and say, yeah, you know what, he's probably not going to be that guy, at least not right away. Well, right now, Jordan Addison is getting no love, and same with Quentin Johnson. I'm hearing a lot of negativity surrounding the Texas Christian University Horned Frog and what he's able to do at the next level. So for me, big plus fast, I have a type. Quentin Johnson fills that role for me. He's that big alpha type wide receiver, and I think he can be that guy wherever he goes. We don't know what his landing spot's going to be, but he can absolutely take over a game based on those two intangibles, size and speed. Now, I know, like a Baylor Bale wide receiver, you're not going to trust him. Well, Texas Christian University wide receivers haven't really had a very good track record, especially in recent memory. Jalen Reagor. I know I fell in love with him once. I swore I wouldn't do it again, but here I am. I'm back with the Horned Frog. Quentin Johnson is definitely a guy that I've got on my radar. Another guy coming into his second season as a wide receiver that I'm watching. How about Khalil Shakir from the Buffalo Bills? Ran 44.6% of his 97 routes from the slot last season. We mentioned the fact that Stephon Diggs is already out there. We mentioned Gabriel Davis on the other side. Isaiah McKenzie, he's gone. Who's going to be that slot guy? Who is going to be that slot guy? It's got to be the second-year receiver in Shakir. He was also targeted on 20.6% of his routes during his rookie season there, while averaging 1.66 yards per route run. Again, when you've got Josh Allen throwing you the ball, there's going to be opportunities there. When you got an offense as efficient as the Buffalo Bills, you have opportunity. Opportunity leads to fantasy points. Fantasy points leads to getting you in my lineup, right? That's how it is. If you can't score, you're not getting in the lineup. It's that simple. Shakir is going to have that opportunity. Another one of those guys you're basically throwing a dart at late in those drafts. We talked about the tight end position. We talked about some wide receivers. Let's talk about some running backs now, starting with the aforementioned Antonio Gibson of the Washington Commanders. I talked about how he's coming into that Jet McKinnon type role in an Eric Bieniemy offense here in Washington, and he's coming off a career high 353 receiving yards and a career high 46 receptions, and that's while splitting some opportunities there with J.D. McKissick. McKissick, he was released. He had that neck injury there. He's no longer in the picture. So any kind of pass catching, any kind of PPR opportunities, that is going to go to Antonio Gibson, who just happened to be a wide receiver when he was at Memphis, converting to a running back. So for me, Antonio Gibson in this offense is going to do a lot of things that Jet McKinnon did for the Kansas City Chiefs last season. In fact, Jet McKinnon, you could argue, was a better option on the backfield than Isaiah Pacheco. So there's a reason to believe that you could theoretically have Antonio Gibson ahead of Brian Robinson in your running back rankings based on what we have seen out of this Eric Bieniemy style offense. So if you're looking at a guy that you're going to get late, really late in drafts, Antonio Gibson may be the guy to fit that bill. Now, running back that was a lot higher on draft boards, like Antonio Gibson last season, was Cam Akers of the Los Angeles Rams. At first glance, we look 188 carries, 786 yards. That's nothing special. But 4.2 yards per carry behind one of the worst offensive lines last season should leave fantasy managers with a glimmer. Even a glimmer of hope in fantasy is enough when it comes to Cam Akers. Over the final three contests, those last three games of the season, Akers would go on to finish with no fewer than 104 yards, an average 5.4 yards per attempt. Again, there's that little bit of glimmer on the back end of the season that we're building into the 2023 year. In 5 of the final 6 Rams contests, Akers saw 72% of the team snap and was averaging 19.1 touches and 101.8 total yards per game. That's 5 of the last 6 games. If you translate that into fantasy, because that's what you want to hear, That works out to the RB6 over that time frame. And through weeks 13 through 18, that's not bad. That's the back end stretch. That's playoff time. That's what you want. That is what we are building into for the next year. It also helps when you're getting 100%, yes, 100% of the touches inside the 10-yard line. Now, per PFF, from week 10 on, again, we're looking at that back half of the season here. Akers was 21st in yards after contact per attempt, but he was 7th in the elusive run rating and 9th in runs greater than 15 plus yards. So he's breaking off big runs for a Rams offense that had no Cooper Kupp, that had no Matthew Stafford, and had a very bad offensive line. You have to think that offensive line has to be better than it was last season. Matthew Stafford should be back under center, and Cooper Kupp should be reestablishing himself as the best wide receiver in fantasy once again this season. Now, Akers, he continues to be that marker when it comes to those Achilles injuries. That's probably why we're seeing his ADP down around RB25 right now. So that's an ADP that I think Akers can live up to and surpass pretty quickly heading into the next season. Another running back we could talk about, because we like to talk about running backs here, because the devaluation of the running back position is something that is running rapid throughout fantasy. So we need to give the running backs a little bit more love. And since Major's not on with me today, I am going to talk more about the running backs, especially the one down in Tampa, Rachaad White. Now, I'm going to mix this up because Major loves his running backs. Tara loves her running backs that can catch. Rachaad White is both those backs. Perhaps the Buccaneers, maybe they do get cute. Maybe they draft Bijan Robinson at pick number 19, because I do think Bijan Robinson is that guy who's going to slide down a little bit further than where fantasy guys would like to see. We'd love to see Bijan Robinson go top 10, wouldn't we? We really would. However, that is probably not going to happen. So 19 is realistic of a place in which he could land. The Buccaneers are a realistic landing spot for him. I don't want him there because I really believe in the talent of Rachaad White. In recent weeks, we've seen Rachaad White, that ADP, steadily climb. Previously, that ADP was somewhere around 133. Now that number is closer to 94, and I'm expecting that number to continue to move up throughout this offseason until the draft. And then we see what the Bucs do at the draft. That number could go up, that number could go down. But if you're drafting right now, the reward is better than the risk. It's greater than the risk right now. Last season, White was 7th in the NFL in targets per snap amongst running backs. And that was at a 12.8% target share. While Fournette there, he's out of the picture. Someone needs to account for that vacant 83 targets. Yes, Chris Godwin's going to get in on that. Yes, Mike Evans is going to get in on that. But 83 targets out of the running back, that is a lot. Now, not to mention that Fournette ran the second most routes amongst all backs just a season ago. Baker Mayfield is going to need a check down. Baker Mayfield, you know he loves that YOLO ball. He's going to air it out there for Mike Evans. He's going to air it out there for Chris Godwin, but he's also going to need to check it down, and that is where Rachaad White comes in. He's that guy that can take that check down, and he can take it to the house anytime. Fantasy managers, we saw what Rachaad White can do when given the opportunity. And when Leonard Fournette missed time, back in week 10 comes to mind there. He ran the ball 22 times for 105 yards. And then against the Cleveland Browns the following week, he had a 9-catch performance. So you know he can run the ball. You know he can catch the ball. What have the Bucs done? They added Chase Edmonds. If you think Chase Edmonds is going to carve out a role in this offense or any offense, I don't know what to tell you anymore. Hey, I wanted to believe Chase Edmonds was going to be that guy in Miami last season. I mean, Raheem Mostert there, and then they ended up trading for Jeffrey Wilson later, but it's like, you know what, Raheem Mostert, okay, Chase Edmonds. I can see Chase Edmonds having a very productive role. We saw him in Arizona be a prolific pass catcher. That never happened in Miami. And with Rachaad White already in Tampa Bay, I don't see Edmonds being that pass catching back. That's going to be White's responsibility. So right now, White is sitting on 3 down back potential, and that's potential I am not willing to pass up. And speaking of potential, how about new Eagles running back Rashad Penny? Yes, I'm going to talk about him. I got a short coming out on him here in probably on the weekend. You're going to want to catch that. Back in 2017 with the San Diego State Aztecs, Penny ran for 2,248 yards, 23 touchdowns, and he finished 5th in the Heisman voting. So you know Penny can be productive. That's why he was drafted in the first round there by the Seattle Seahawks. That's why they took a shot at him. It's not because he's not talented. He oozes talent. That's what Penny is. There may not be a more talented runner of the ball right now than Penny when healthy, and that's a big if, the healthy part. Now, when healthy, we've seen Penny average 6 yards per carry the last 2 seasons. On his career, he is averaging 5.7 yards per carry. And back in 2021, Penny would rush for 749 yards and 6 touchdowns in just 10 games. Okay, that's not too terribly bad. That's not getting you too excited. How about 495 of those, and 5 of those touchdowns came in the last 3 contests of the season? Yes, there's like a 170-yard game. There's a 190-yard game thrown in there. And again, this was behind one of the worst offensive lines in the leagues with the Seattle Seahawks. Penny has never been that productive guy when it comes to pass catching. He's never been asked to be that pass catcher. And they're not going to ask him to do that in Philadelphia. They never asked Miles Sanders to do it in Philadelphia because they had Boston Scott, because they had Kenneth Gainwell. And yes, Trey Sermon, he's going to play a factor somewhere down the road. At least the coach says he is. And you know what? The coach basically said, hey, we got to find a way to get the guy the ball more. He's a talented running back, yada, yada, yada. Coach, you're the one who makes those decisions. If you didn't think he was talented last season, telling us he's talented now isn't going to really scare me away from Rashad Penny. Now, we see what Miles Sanders can do when not getting an opportunity to catch the ball. A healthy Miles Sanders last season behind this Eagles line ran for the 5th most yards in the National Football League, 1,269 on just 259 attempts. That Eagles line was graded by PFF as the best offensive line of 2022. Sanders recorded 52.1% of his yards after contact, as only 39.8% of those carries had contact at or behind the line of scrimmage. So Sanders was picking up big chunks of yards because he wasn't contacted until after the line of scrimmage. That means he's already 2, 3, 4 yards into the second level before facing that first bit of contact. You get the most efficient runner the last couple seasons, and you give him an offensive line in which he's not getting contacted until the second level. Could you imagine what a healthy Rashad Penny is going to be able to do with the Philadelphia Eagles? I can't even imagine. Penny's only limitation will be himself and that ability to stay on the field due to his health. So those are kind of some running backs right there that I really like. And I'll give you a bonus one here. I'll give you a wide receiver here because I feel we need to talk about the wide receiver version of Irv Smith Jr., and that is Terrace Marshall of the Carolina Panthers. I love DJ Chark. He's one of my favorite wide receivers in the game. I don't think DJ Chark gets nearly enough credit. He's heading to Carolina, as is Adam Thielen. So you're thinking, why are you on Terrace Marshall? You've got 2 capable wide receivers probably ahead of him in the depth chart right now, which is going to make Terrace Marshall probably a slot type receiver. You'll probably see him and Adam Thielen kind of both work the slot from time to time. Marshall, like I said, we're already forgetting that he's even on the Carolina Panthers at this time because of all the moves that the Panthers do. They signed Miles Sanders. They signed DJ Chark. They signed Adam Thielen. They're going to get the number 1 overall quarterback, their quarterback of choice here. Again, another reason you should probably like Terrace Marshall, they're getting their quarterback of choice. I'll put it this way. Expectations have never been lower for Terrace Marshall. We had some high expectations of the former LSU Tiger coming out of college. But if you set that bar low enough, eventually you are going to trip over it, and people are going to praise you for accomplishing this, simply tripping over that bar. If you set that bar too high, you may never achieve that again. You set that bar low, you got to be able to trip over every once in a while. And again, that's when people are going to praise you for what you're able to do, yada, yada, yada. That's why Terrace Marshall, deep in drafts, probably going undrafted in a lot of these, depending on how deep you go. He's a guy that you could probably grab waiver wire week 1, and by week 3 or 4, find him as a viable flex option. Third year is the year of the breakout for the wide receiver position, and that is the year which Terrace Marshall is now entering. Thielen's 1.06 yards per route run was the 17th worst in the league last season. And that's already one area in which Marshall was already surpassing him. And Thielen was a former Pro Bowl wide receiver. So if you're already averaging more yards per route run than your competition, then it's reasonable to believe that you should be able to surpass and sustain any kind of production on said receiver. That's an opportunity that Marshall's going to have this season. We know DJ Chark is probably going to be the alpha wide receiver 1 there in Carolina, except we haven't really seen DJ Chark be that guy. In fact, even last season, he's another one of those wide receivers who was battling the injury bug and was hurt more often than not, and he missed a lot of time due to injury. So you got Adam Thielen, who played hurt a lot of last season, who's an aging veteran, a good one, but he's aging. You got DJ Chark, who also played hurt for a good portion of the year. And then you got Terrace Marshall, who is entering his third season, who has a lot to prove, especially if he wants to get that second contract with the Carolina Panthers. And it's going to be enticing because when you get yourself a young quarterback that you could potentially marry yourself with and tie yourself with for the rest of your future, you're going to want to ball out so that you can stay with said player, especially if you're going to look at a guy like CJ Stroud, a guy like Bryce Young, and even Anthony Richardson. If you could pair yourself up with them for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years until that second or third contract comes up, then you've got to be feeling pretty good about yourselves. The best way to do that is by absolutely going out there and balling out. And like I said, the opportunity is there. DJ Chark has always been a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Adam Thielen's on the back end of his career, wide receiver 2 at best. He's going to give you some good production. He's going to be a nice security blanket for a rookie quarterback. Terrace Marshall is that guy who can give you big-time opportunities down in the red zone. He's a big-bodied wide receiver, good wingspan. He's going to be able to make some plays happen when they're needed. With that all being said, if you need to make a splash play in your fantasy leagues, you need to head to fantasypoints.com today. Sign up, subscribe, a one-stop shop for all your fantasy football needs. From rankings to articles, XFL, they got you covered. Their betting props, hey, they got the prop masters going on over there. New props all season long. You're going to want to check that out. One of the best bang for your buck websites out there today. Don't miss out on it. Make sure you sign up. Hey, tell Matt sent you. They'll make sure you're taken care of. That all being said, this has been another edition of the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast, episode 176, presented by the Fantasy Points Media Group. For Tara Roberts, for Major Caldwell, I'm Matt Donnelly, and we will see you next week.